Only two today? And that. Okay. Yeah, you can see the presentation. Here we go. Okay. Yeah, I have to check you, but did you register? I was talking with Natalia. Did you register on the platform? You can open your. What do you mean for classroom? On the platform for the registration of the project work. I mean. Yes, the form. Yes, anyway, I remember your email. So yes, basically the idea is relevant. Is of course you have to work a bit on it because it's a complex idea, but you can go ahead anyway and register on the forum. Okay, don't be shy. Register on the forum without asking me in advance, and then I will check all your requests, and I will come back to you if there is something to adjust. Okay. So today is finally Thursday, so we go back to the or we recall what we started talking about digital entrepreneurship. So this is the module of digital entrepreneurship, and we start again exactly from where we closed last time when after having watched the video of Dallara. Do you remember the video? Did you have the chance to watch it again? No, because I gave you a kind of homework to discuss, and so watch the video, identify the relevant messages, and discuss with your colleagues and also here with us. Nobody did the job? Yes, I remember. You did it or not? No. Okay. It was in the slides. No, it was last. It was a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, because first day you told us about
Yes. No, we didn't have the lesson at the end.
Yeah, I tried to connect to the
No, I gave the message the day before. Probably you were not present the day before.
Sorry, I didn't do because there is an intersection with my other course, so I sometimes struggle to like I attempt the other one and this one, so that's why I'm sorry.
Yeah, the slides should be on the Google. The last time slides should be on the Google. Yeah, just to check. Yes. Yes. Here is the homework. So it's on the slide. Okay, anyway, will be next time. I invite you to do it for the next time. And now we start talking about the, let me report, okay. We start talking about digital business models. And we need some, let's say, background theory for arriving to talk, explain, and see also case studies and of course best practices and the development of digital business models. Well, probably I mentioned very quickly about the what we call the goods dominant logic paradigm. And how many of you knows about this, let's say, way for discussing the evolution of the approach towards the market and the consumers? Probably you should know this from marketing studies or corporate business studies. Nobody heard of this?
I'm familiar with the concept, but I didn't know the exact name of it. But like we always study the cycle in our courses, in marketing courses. It's not the name.
Okay. So till I would say 20 or 30 years ago, at least until the advent of the digital technologies, and this is a correlation between the advent of the digital technology and the change in traditional production paradigm. The prevalent paradigm was the approach of the so-called goods dominant logic or GD logic. This is the paradigm that is explained also from the by the traditional economic literature, the traditional economic approach, the approach that we all have studied in, let's say, the basic microeconomics that we study at the first year of economic studies. Okay, so basically there is a manufacturer that designs and develops a product, gathering the requirements, the needs of a new product from, say, its experience, from its knowledge, and from the perception that he has of the customer needs. Of course, this perception can be refined through market studies, through surveys, but the customer is anyway, let's say, a passive subject in this design process. Okay, then the manufacturer produces the product, delivered is on on the market, and hopefully the consumer buys the product, pay for buying this product, and the consumer use the product, and then the product is goes to its natural end, and that's it. So the good in this logic is produced, like we say here, away separately from the customer, in this case interference, and the customer is somehow also perceived as someone that may interfere. And the customer needs are defined ex ante previously. And we have a kind of standardized production. This is again what traditional economic and marketing theory have explained for years. So you have the supplier, the supply chain. The producer, of course, needs suppliers. So the value creation is all on top of the producer. The value embedded in the product is depending just from the producer capabilities. Then the product is delivered. There is an exchange of good for money. The consumer does whatever he wants with the product, and then at a certain point the value of the product is destroyed, both because it's consumed, because it's really a short usage product, or because of the time, because of many reasons, of the obsolescence, and so on, and so on. Yeah.
Is there any logical connection with the process with the name Wool's Dominant Logic?
Yes.
Could you explain it, because maybe I didn't get it.
No, we will arrive to it.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So the explanation is here, or at least part of the explanation is here. The good are at the center of the exchange. The exchange process happens through a transfer of ownership. The producer produces the good, and after receiving the money, transfers the ownership of the good to the customer. Okay? They are not in close contact. The kind of average good, so this is a generalization, is a product that is a push product for a push market. Okay, think about in the, let's say, traditional economy, this is a good example because is an example that can accompany us from the traditional economies to the new economy. Think about the car. Okay. Till 20 years ago, the number of combinations and the level of personalization of the cars that we have now was not possible. Okay, was not possible, and the car market was substantially pushed. So when you wanted to buy a car, you were going to the car seller, and I would like this car, more or less with these features, and the seller was looking into a database. Okay, I have this car that more or less have the characteristics that you want, but it's red instead of blue. But I have just this.
So it might be the same for the cell phones as well.
For the
Cell phones, mobile.
Yes.
For example.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't know if we need like touch screens or until they did it. And
Yes, definitely. But this the characteristics of the car and the offer was built on the previous experience of the car manufacturer, of the statistics about the preference of the users. But definitely, this was the customer didn't have so many choices. It didn't have the chance to interfere with the producer way of producing.
It was somehow the.
Can you come in the front? You are only two, because otherwise I have to. With the mask and the distance is difficult.
I mean, it was about the final product which guided the process of acquisition instead of the real.
Yes, the real need.
The real desire.
The real desire, the real need of the customer. Okay. The product is always tangible, and it's easy to attribute, again in a push manner, a monetary value. I produce this car. I know from the economic law of offer and demand that the right price is this one. So basically, in this traditional vision, the producer has to deal just with production management and the optimization of the quantity to be produced in order to achieve economies of scale and control fixed costs, capex, and variable costs. And as we know from economic literature, the aim is to maximize the profit. So the difference between revenues and costs in the short term. More or less the same happens for the services instead of products. The only difference is they are just immaterial. But again, the service is designed ex ante. And there is no, or very few space for personalization of the services. So, in the goods dominant logic, in the GD logic, the creation of value takes, because there are still some examples that work like this, and we will talk about it. Takes place within the company and not in the market. That is only the place for exchanging good against money.
So, may I ask?
Yes,
in like this
you have to ask.
How was the competition between brands then? If they don't focus on the customer exactly, whether then they focus on the good and
the problem is here. The competition was basically just on the quality of offer and the price.
that's just it.
That's it.
And hoping to consumers.
That is still there, but we will see, as we will see. Then, from this kind of approach, we observed a first phenomenon. That is the phenomenon of so-called, it's very difficult to say it in English or also in Italian, commoditization. So the majority of the goods exchanged in this way became a commodity. What does this mean? That basically goods are basically undifferentiated, and this happens especially for what we call essential goods. If we keep 1 kilo of pasta of Barilla and Buitoni, basically, apart the brand, how you can appreciate really the difference between these two commodities. Price is the same. 1 cent, 2 cents of difference. Extremely low price. The packaging, for example. So in this way, but just through the good, the commodity, you have very low chances to have a differentiation of the product that enables the production of an added value, a perceived added value that you can justify with an higher price. Okay? So, going back to the commoditization, is the process that occurs when in a field where the potential of innovation has been significantly reduced over the time. This is actually what happened to the goods produced in the good dominant logic, because here again, the consumer is outside the process of developing the product. The products of certain categories, but cars are still in these categories, for example, become so mature and similar to each other that the market, customers, find it difficult to perceive which are the differences between products of different brands. So the competition goes exclusively on price and the profit. For the extra profit, like we know from economic theory, the short time is reduced, and at this point, only big companies can survive, relying on the control of costs and then economic of scale. If we still talk about pasta, you can realize that only, let's say, big producers, multinational, are Barilla, are capable to keep low prices. The other pasta producer that are small producer are more expensive, and they need to rely on something more, that is the location where they produce, Gragnano, no? Just to differentiate a bit. And it's not just a matter of quality. Probably their quality will be better than Barilla or whatever. But this is not what the consumer perceives at glance. Okay. So the step further after commoditization, in order to create an added value around the product, was the other phenomenon, or the connected phenomenon, the one of consequential phenomenon after the commoditization, was the phenomenon of servitization, that stands for the incorporations of services into products in order to maintain or increase the perceived value from the customers and the profitability. And there are many examples.
talking about commodities or other products?
We are talking about commodities. Commodities that are servitized, yes, in order to increase somehow the perceived value. It is what, for example, I've already used this example when talking about the information matrix, so the value of the information that is incorporated in the product and information that is incorporated in the productive process at the beginning. Think about the gasoline. Okay. It's a commodity by definition, but many of us have the cards, not only for fidelity reasons, so you get the points and you get, okay, but you have cards that have incorporated some services, like for companies, the control of consumption of gasoline of the fleet, of the company fleet, for example. So there are services that are incorporated also in the cost of 1 liter of gasoline that provide an added value for the customers. So servitization may concern all manufacturing companies that are pushed to change the business model from product-centric to the integration of the product with services. The final aim is, of course, the differentiation of the offering and increase the customer loyalty. So, associated to the concept of servitization is the birth of the service economy. So there are many features of the service definitions. So the service is the work that the employees do for their managers, set of the benefits offered by a service provider, generated by the work of technical systems, individual activities that are commissioned according to the needs of the customers, and the application of really specialized skills through acts, processes, services for the benefit of another entity or the entity itself. This is the definition given by Vargo and Lash, that are the two economists that first talk about the paradigm of the good dominant logic in comparison to the paradigm of the service dominant logic. So, servitization enables the so-called phenomenon of co-creation, where the values is always triggered by an exchange, but there is always a service that is the object of the transaction. And where the physical good is present, the physical good becomes the mean, the physical mean for providing a service. So the physical good is not anymore the final aim of the exchange, but it's just the mean of the exchange, the mean for transporting the service. So we enter here in the so-called service dominant logic. Where the emphasis, as we said, is not anymore on the tangible product, and it's on the service, the services that the customer can obtain. Ownership is not important anymore. We know that in the last 20 years, we moved from the economics of ownership to the economics of access, where we don't care if something is registered as our property. We care more to use it, to have it, to have a service. Try to reconnect what we are saying now to what we talked about in the last lessons. Think about the cloud computing, for example. Trying to move from the theoretical perspective to the practical one. So the customer obtains the benefits by renting in order to use a physical object, but also have services. That means have labors and skills available, pay for accessing the facilities and the networks. Customers do not always, I would say, because they still buy goods, but they do not buy goods and services, but they buy the offers that give and corresponding to the service that create value. So with this approach, this paradigm, the traditional division between tangible and intangible assets is becoming obsolete. And, of course, really important, the shift towards services that are driving to a change in the perspective. So products, so goods and services, are produced not anymore just only from the producer perspective, but from the customer's perspective. When we talk about configurations of people, technologies, production technologies, value propositions, and information, we talk about product service systems, PSS. And this can be classified in three categories. Product-oriented services, where the ownership of the tangible product is still transferred to the customer, and a service is provided in order to continue to ensure the usefulness of the asset, of the good, for a certain product.
So it's like when you buy a cell phone, it's a guarantee period.
Yeah, there are a lot of services that user-oriented services, where the ownership of the good is maintained by the service provider, who sells the functionalities of the product to the customer. And the third model is of the product service system, is the result-oriented services, where the service provider sells just the results rather than functionality. In other words, the customer buys the utility of the service rather than the functionality. And the example here is, again, about cars. Traditional car manufacturers offer product-oriented services in this PSS approach, product service system. Now, when you go to buy a car, unless in certain specific cases that are really conditioned from the logistic, now I will explain better what I mean. You really buy the car that you want. If you think about the cars, basically cars are the same from more than 1 century. You need 4 wheels, an engine, a cockpit, 2 doors, 4 doors, for let's say chairs and a steer. Okay. So the basic car is, of course, what is changing? The technology of the engines, for example, no? The brakes. But on top of, let's say, the minimum standard for not polluting and security, you have now plenty of personalizations that you can get with the car. I don't know what happened. Sometimes here should be a timing. Let's just let me. Zoom. We are back. Okay. So there are plenty of personalization that you can get when you buy a car. Useful, maybe. Really useful, maybe not. No, the colors of the lights that changes in the car. So, of course, are nice, are tricky, but no. But this is the level of personalization that they offer in order to gain value, because you pay for that. You perceive as a customer more value. You perceive the fact that you are able to customize the car. Then, when you go to buy the car, it is really unlikely now that you pay the car all for cash. But strangely, you get an extra discount if you pay the car with a loan, with installments, and so on. Of course, car manufacturers are also financial companies that embed financial services into the product, and their revenues comes also from the financial services that are embedded in the product and that you pay for. So the car, that is something that is really tangible, actually becomes just a means of selling services that are financial services, connection services, because now all the cars are fully connected, and so on. The services, for example, it is likely that now you receive a call every year telling you, oh, you remember that you have to bring us the car because we have to make the annual check, and so on. So these are all services that are embedded in the product, even though in the product-oriented service, the ownership is transferred from the car manufacturer to the customer. We got the second level. We need the functionality of the car. We rent a car. You can have a long-time rental or a short-time rental, depending what we need, because we are in a city or whatever. We need a car just for 15 days. So we rent the functionality with all the services embedded. If the car gets broken, we have the assistance and so on. But this is also the other product, the product oriented service. So we are not anymore the owners, we just rent. Third model, result oriented services. We need to go from A to B. This is the result we want to get. Car sharing. The car is a good that give us a service for going from A to B. And that's it.
But what's the difference with the second model? I mean, even if I rent a car, I need to go from A to B.
Yes, but you have the functionality of the car because you have the car for 1 day, 2 days, always available. It's somehow your car. While with the car sharing, you need just the result. Going outside, picking a car, and go there. That's it. It's finished. And we don't talk about efficiency because, of course, the car in general, the ownership of the car is or the renting of a car is an extremely inefficient from the economic point of view. If you think that you use the car 2 hours a day for having it parked for the rest of the day, it's still, and with a capital immobilized there that doesn't do anything. It's parked in the street. It's extremely inefficient. But this is another story. So, what is the value that we can embed in the services and in the products? So, the definition concerns the trade-off between benefits and sacrifice that we can get. Benefits that we can get, the sacrifice, pay money also is a sacrifice. The definitions are related to the context of the customer experience and to the process that improves, enhances the customer well-being. So the notion of value, as understood as the improvement for the customer, can be analyzed from several dimensions that are not only the monetary or the strictly economical dimensions, but could we say that for renting for some days, yes. If I understood well, the question is, the answer is yes. Yeah, of course, when we do we use let's say our own car or the rent car, we have more choices. While the the car sharing is a bit more standardized, of course. So several dimensions depending on the meaning of the term improvement, what we mean for improvement. Also from, let's say, the psychological point of view, you know, I feel more happy to do not think about managing my car, but I prefer to go with the buses or use the car sharing. So the value is experiential and contextual. So the service dominant logic in relation to the value creation, the service again is the fundamental basis for the exchange. The customer becomes always a co-creator of the value. And this is actually what we do every day, even though we don't really understand, or we don't always are not always aware of this. But basically, the information about us that is gathered over the internet through the social networks, through our behavior on the internet, is exactly used to inform the producer about our real preferences, in order to offer better personalized services and products that embed the services. So all social economic actors are then resource integrators, exactly for this reason. And every one of us attributes its own value to a certain product that can also mean a differentiation in the price, the final prices. So there are so many definitions in literature about the value creation, but service dominant logic considers value creation in terms of co-creation, and emphasize on the process that includes the actions that comes from both the suppliers and the customers and all the stakeholders of this production system. So value creation is, can we call it a network of networks? Okay, where the network of the market, the primary market, is influenced also from the network of suppliers, for example, where sellers have to buy, for example, other services, and where services, products are more and more complex and need the integration of several resources that usually are not always in the disposal of the final provider. Think about, we will talk a lot about this, about platform models. Spotify. Okay. Spotify is not the owner of the songs. Okay. But Spotify relies on a network of singers and song producers. And on the other hand, it sells to a network of consumers. But owning nothing, having just the right to sell to someone else and keep a fee for that. Okay. You can imagine that, considering the variety of products and so on, the process of value creation is not linear. It's not always with the same shape. And the value of use is, let's say, really relates from the customers and accumulates in the customers' spheres with, let's say, different perception in different contexts, and of course the reflection in different prices, having the same type of service. Even though it's very difficult to have always the same type of service. So here is the comparison between the good dominant logic and the service dominant logic. So, the good dominant logic, the customer is a destroyer of value, while, because at the end of the consumption, it destroys the value. While in the service dominant logic is a creator of value. In the GD logic, he has the limited power to influence the quality or the characteristics of the product, while in the SD logic, he informs the seller about the characteristics of the service that he wants to have. He wants to, even he doesn't know that he wants to have the service, I would say. Did you catch this? Okay. And we said that it's a destroyer of value, but it's a destroyer of goods, because it's stimulated to destroy goods and substitute goods. With new, and this is really at the core of the, let's say, capitalistic approach, where goods has to be produced, consumed, and destroyed. If you want to think, let's say, at large, this is something that conflicts with the, let's say, a vision of the world that goes towards, let's say, a circular economy, you know. Okay. So, in the service dominant logic, the relationship, of course, as for the loyalty the customer is foreseen in the long-term perspective. Of course, the seller in the GD logic maximize the short-term profit, while through the loyalty and sustainability, with the SD logic, the seller maximize the profit in the long term, the medium term, increasing the value of the company. So, the consumer that you, as an entrepreneur, if you have to deal with, is a consumer that is connected, informed, and active. And this means that he can have access to the information about the product that he wants to buy. It's very easy to find the information, and it will be always easier to do that. It has a global vision. It can choose the provider very easily. Is it change information about the information about the product, the products, through its network. It's capable to experiment and also to judge, to say, no, this is not good. Yeah, this is good. So, for creating value, some scientists, economic scientists, developed the so-called DART, D-A-R-T model for value creation that is based on the actions that also through digital technologies consumer and producer have to do with consumers in order to create value. So a dialogue with consumer allow them to access to the process of co-creation, identify a way how the risk about products is minimized through the dialogue, the access, and it somehow is minimized and is shared between producers and consumers. And what we produce is transparent. The way how the product is produced is transparent. A couple of questions here. Okay, this is okay. The logic comparison is giving. Yeah, the logic comparison is exactly the comparison between the good service, good dominant logic and the service dominant logic. And then we come to the customer experience. What we mean for customer experience? What is the definition? There are also here there are plenty of definitions about customer experience, where customer experience is the cognitive and emotional consequence of a customer exposures to an interaction on an interaction with people, processes, technologies, products, services, and other outputs of the company. You see here in this definition that we don't talk anymore only about product. The company, the perception of a company from the customer point of view is the mix of product, of course, services, interaction with people, processes, technologies, and other outputs. So, exposures and customer company interaction. So this is the process. Customer cognitive impression about the value and the quality of product services, influence on future purchases, and word of mouth. Passaparola. Are you Italian?
Yes.
Okay. Where are you from?
I'm from Turkey.
Turkey. So passaparola is not really easy to translate. Word of mouth.
Word of mouth.
Okay. So the capability to manage the customer experience means the ability of the company to read and understand also the emotional component of the customers and implement the actions that are needed for satisfying. With the progressive transformation of goods and services into commodities, the customer experience is now the key differentiating element for companies. And word of mouth can enable of course positive opinion and the increase of revenues. So the modern customer is increasingly looking for new and emotional experience rather than managing a product. Just the physical product. Okay, so the atmosphere. It's essential to provide the customer with the opportunity to enjoy new experiences. If you also look at the advertisements, they push more and more on experience rather than consumption, even though the consumption is the final aim, of course. So business do not sell experiences, but rather provide artifacts and context that foster them and that can be appropriately used by consumers to co-create their experience. Okay. And here you can find some definition. Sorry, this definition of Prahlad and Ramaswamy. Okay, that talks about rational, emotional, sensory, physical, and spiritual. So these are the components of the customer experience. So the dimensions that companies have to deal with in order to, this is the reason why also digital technologies are used for catching emotions, for example, to understand cognitive needs. Think about the sentiment analysis that is done that is done on the social networks. Okay, and then companies have to set up processes for tracking, supervise, organize every interaction between a customer and the company through the customer, so-called customer life cycle. We know that they are informed, they don't just consume, they comment, they criticize, they interact. So companies have to be ready for tracking, supervising, organizing these interactions. Definition of Gartner, you heard of it probably, is a market study company oriented to the digital technologies and defines the customer experience management as the practice for designing and reacting to customer interaction to meet or exceed customer expectation and thereby increase customer satisfaction, loyalty, and advocacy. Okay, so the ability to reach, engage, and listen to the customers in a transparency way across channels, business units, market, and all customer-facing teams. The aim of the customer experience management is to optimize interactions from the customer point of view and to build the customer loyalty. Okay. And of course, there are many ways for doing that, traditional channels, but also social media, live chats, and bots, and so on. Okay, I think we can stop here today. There are questions. Yes, of course. The answer is yes, Nazia. I have a question about my project idea. Okay. Switch on the mic and tell us.
Okay, Professor. So I also sent an email about expert advisors.
Mm-hmm.
So that instead of using technical analysis, through the artificial intelligence can also provide a sentiment of the market. Mm-hmm. From the web, the forums, on the main financial magazines.
Yes.
And I want to know if you think it would be feasible for this project.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, and I can anticipate that I spoke yesterday with the person that will do a lecture in the course exactly on this topic. So yeah, definitely yes. So I think you will find this of your interest.
And also, could you spoke you in private, because since we also have other ideas to which could be quite good before forwarding the official request through the form.
Mm-hmm. No, you can anyway. You can proceed ahead with the form without, and then as soon as you can, you can come on Monday and we can talk about no, Monday not, because it's Wednesday, next Wednesday.
Okay. So can we forward into the same form 2 ideas, and after talk about which one would be
Yes.
better feasible? Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
So can we have a poll?
Yes, the code is